been there since 1980. And we had a new president who was installed by the military and later in 2017 and later be elected into office in 2018. So it justifies why we mentioned or we looked at Zimbabwe's transition into post Mugabe era as the key electoral hypothesis. The subplots were
Acknowledge we lost you.
Oh. On va vendre beaucoup de pays en Afrique. Hein.
Acknowledge we lost the sound. We can't hear you anymore. Je vais l'appeler, attendez. Hein.
Maman Nangayo, Mamma Mia.
Prof, I hope I was clear. I was just booted out, so I'm resharing again.
Yes, we lost the last maybe 2 minutes or less.
Okay. So I was explaining the 2018 electoral hypothesis, and I was now explaining the sub-hypothesis. So if you look at the 2018 electoral plot hypothesis, it was a transitional period. So we were looking at aspects that can potentially show reform or a change. But what we see in 2018 is that there was not a very big change. So in 2023 election, the hypothesis was a continuation of the 2018 electoral hypothesis. The hypothesis that we had is a long established but fragmented military facing dissatisfaction and demands for change. So because in 2018, the government that was there came through a military coup, there were expectations of rewarding the military and giving them more positions in government and giving them more economic power and influence. But this did not happen. So the dissatisfaction became the predictive electoral hypothesis. And the use of force and converting it into political power was central. And I will explain this clearly. And this is clearly because in 2023 election, when they were a protest against the delayed election results, the military was used to shoot people in the streets. A situation that it created or reinforced the use of coercion, intimidation, and fear that has been existing before the transition in 2018. Additionally, the use of soft power or forms of social immanent power or influence also exhibited. They have been existing previously, and we saw them coming into existence again. Number one, it was the use of religion. Religious institutions, they were used to authenticate and legitimize the new government that was elected or that was reinstalled in 2023. And the president was known of the statement that the voice of God is the voice of the people. So he used that by bringing the religious institutions to vouch that he was elected by God. And this is why the voice of the people is the voice of God. We also saw them capturing the traditional power of local authorities and opinion makers within communities. So the traditional leaders were captured by being awarded resources such as vehicles, food hampers, and different packages that will simply influence them to support the local authorities and institutions. Besides that, we also see the use of charisma and the demands for change. This was particularly used by the opposition parties. So, given the electoral hypothesis in 2023 and 2018, what we can see is that the attempts to show that there is a clear transition by the post-coup government did not really yield any results. For example, in 2018, the post-coup regime started saying we are anti-corruption, we are a new dispensation, we are a second republic, Zimbabwe is open for business. All these things did not materialize because they are still being reflected today, and they have become more worse than what we used to see during the First Republic, which is the first dynasty that we had seen. Here, I have already explained the issues that existed after the 2023 elections. We had violence that was used through the military, corruption and patronage continued. State institutions continued being conflated with the ruling party, which has been existing since 1980 to date. And the dynasty making challenge is actually continuing. And this is where I drew the topic that we see the continued zombification of state power and the party. How this is coming out is the current president has actually influenced his party to start campaigning for a change of the constitution to remove the term of office limits from 2 terms to extending beyond the 2 terms. So the current president is limited to rule or run the country up to 2028, but they are already campaigning to extend the term of office to 2030 and possibly 2035. What this means is now the president is almost getting to 90 years old. And this is exactly what we saw in the first regime under Robert Mugabe. His term of office just continuing without limits. And this is what the current regime also want. So what it means is we are seeing that zombification itself coming into existence. And this creates a big problem when it comes to dynastization of state power. And I'll explain how this is coming out. During the First Republic regime under Robert Mugabe, when he was about to leave power, he started influencing his wife to come into the picture. And the bringing in of his wife is what actually accelerated or increased the pace at which internal power transfer, started to emerge until the military intervened. And today, we have also seen the president's wife coming into the public through humanitarian and relief aid to the communities. But see, what is much more worse is that we have seen the president promoting his own children into powerful military positions, is what we see today in in Uganda, where Museveni has his own child being at the center of the military. And besides that, we have also seen the president appointing his business partners into powerful positions, not just in government, but also in the political party that he leads. So the assumption that is coming through is that the president wants to extend the term of office so that he will be able to maneuver to leave his child who is in the military in a very strategic position that he will be able to assume power around 2035. That speaks through the dynasticization of state power and the party. What is also emerging is the speed of capitalism. The president wants to displace the vice president from assuming power by he introduced a group of wealthy people who have been incorporated or co-opted into the political party that is ruling. And these people are the ones that are now funding campaigns against the vice president. And these are also the people that are now buying political loyalty from the general citizens by distributing vehicles, providing or distributing resources such as food aid, providing access to water through boreholes drilling, among other things. So what it means is we're seeing a new practice of the rise of money and politics for bribery. But we also have the state security system being at the center of disrupting any civic activism that emerges. Now, the forms of immanent power that are emerging, number one is the ethnic and social identity. The president himself has started to promote traditional leadership and pitching himself as the paramount leader of traditional authority. And his birthday has been introduced as a public holiday under the name of the paramount traditional authority that is known as the Munomotapa tradition. I already explained the rise of money power. Money is being used to buy loyalty through influencers such as artists, musicians, and also traditional leaders. So these people have received vehicles from different angles and across the country. And when you have artists, musicians, and traditional leaders who are actually the influencer of the public voice and choice and attitudes, then it can tell you that consent for a vote is likely to come through these bribery approaches. The ruling party has also adopted an approach where it sees the party as the vanguard or as the instrument that will direct how governance works. What has also become very concerning looking forward to the next cycle of elections is in 2023, the opposition party that contested for elections and had members of parliament in power, it has been captured. It was captured by having internal people rising against their leadership and also expelling members of parliament from the opposition. What this did is that it has created more than 3 opposition formations, and it has weakened the opposition in parliament, such that some people have been co-opted and they have now started supporting the government towards, or the ruling party towards changing the constitution to extend the term of office of the president. And religious institutions have also been given vehicles across the country to also support the change of the constitution in support of the president's term of office being extended. So what this does is we are going to see continuous zombification of citizens, and the zombification of the presidency, which is likely to be the key electoral hypothesis for the next electoral cycle in the country. So, in terms of citizen zombification, violence, fear, the use of liberation credentials are going to continue. And the use of partisan distribution of resources is likely to continue uninterrupted. The opposition is highly fragmented. It has been captured. Many of its members of parliament have been co-opted, and some have actually defected from the opposition to the ruling party, which makes the country to actually run under a one-party state technically, because the opposition is no longer represented, effectively in parliament. And in terms of the zombification of the president, you will see that since the 2023 elections, the state security institutions have become much more central in determining the narrative around the president. And we have many pseudo non-governmental organizations and that have been structured or established around the president. And we also have the institutions of the state that can no longer act independently, but they all take orders from the ruling party. This makes it very difficult for the electoral competition to be policy-based, and it becomes party-based. And as a result, you'd find that issues around state capture, corruption, institutional reforms will only be in the interest of the ruling party. The key drivers of that are sustaining the scenarios I have given above. Number one is money politics, where patronage is bought during campaigns and thereby undermining electoral competition. I've mentioned in terms of ethnic identity is instrumental in determining key political contestants, especially those who will be in the next government and those who are supporting the president, because he is epitomizing his leadership as that of a paramount traditional system. Internal factionalism is likely to also be very serious within the ruling party itself, but also within the opposition party, given that it's already fragmented. And lastly, it's about misinformation. The state-controlled media and increased paid political trolls who are actually immune from national laws such as the cyber laws. They're seemingly targeting opposition parties and civic actors, effectively legitimizing authoritarian consolidation and amplifying polarization in the country. I think basically this is what I can put across in terms of the electoral hypothesis from the time we started the campaign in 2018, and then when we had the next campaign 2023, and the projection for the next electoral cycle, which if the term of office is not changed, then we can have elections in 2028. And this particular diagram is simply demonstrating how the electoral outcomes are determined. We have the ruling parties and the PF. It influences the security and the distribution of resources, which I've said securitized and monetized elections. And the use of the security and money around elections, it has also contributed to the demobilization of the civic society and the opposition parties. And you'd find that the judiciary is central to influencing decisions that affect citizens' consent. The business community and traditional leaders have also been very influential in influencing the citizens' consents, which determines electoral outcomes. I think this is the end of my presentation. In conclusion, consent by fear is likely to continue. Money is likely to continue being used to mobilize support and paying loyalty. And the liberation history will continue shaping the political culture in the country and helping as a pedestal or as a launchpad for any political campaign. And ultimately, the medium of electoral legitimacy will always be the course and the law. Thank you, and over to you, Prof.
Thank you. Thank you, knowledge. Alors, je ne sais pas si vous avez pu suivre. Je sais qu'il y en a au moins un qui n'a pas pu suivre par défaut de langue. Donc, les autres, j'espère que ça a été. Alors, et on peut commencer par une première chose. Si vous avez besoin d'abord des questions pour des éclaircissements, et après, on pourra discuter. Qui veut, qui a des questions d'éclaircissement? Ouais, sorry. Ah, mince, comment je fais pour revenir en arrière?
Enfin, je vais profiter là.
So,
Je traduis pour lui ou je parle en anglais
bah, tu peux parler en français et puis on va traduire en anglais. Knowledge.
Je peux traduire si vous voulez.
OK.
OK. Mais je peux lui dire directement, mais c'est pour que les autres...
Oui, pour que les autres s'y entendent, oui. OK.
Ma question, c'est que vous avez parlé que le 2018 était un peu un poste...
Excusez-moi, je vous coupe juste parce qu'il faudrait s'approcher de l'ordinateur parce que sinon, moi, je ne vous entends pas. Je ne pourrais pas traduire.
Vas-y, parle.
Bon.
Là, tu entends?
Là, vous m'entendez?
Oui, là, c'est bien, merci.
OK. Donc, on a présenté que 2018 était un peu un post-Mugabe, c'est une période post-Mugabe. Et ma question, c'est est-ce que c'est vraiment un post-Mugabe ou est-ce qu'il y a une transformation profonde pour dire que c'est un post ou c'est une continuité de ce qui était à Mugabe? Parce que quand je vous entends, j'ai plutôt l'impression, bien sûr, la personne Mugabe est partie, mais en termes de système, est-ce qu'il y a vraiment une transformation, enfin, era, in a sense that enfin, vraiment un changement profond du système. La deuxième chose, c'est que vous utilisez souvent le concept de dynastie. Donc là aussi, je me pose vraiment la question, pour l'instant en tout cas, est-ce qu'on observe une dynastie de type tel qu'on l'appelle en tout cas dans le système, je dirais, dynastie familiale, ou est-ce que vous considérez la dynastie étant le parti? Donc, c'est-à-dire que est-ce que c'est la famille parti ou c'est une dynastie individuelle, familiale du président? Il y a eu des tentatives, mais la tentative de Mugabe n'a pas fonctionné. On n'est pas sûr non plus que la tentative du président actuel fonctionne. Donc ça aussi, je voulais, est-ce que on peut vraiment analyser à partir du concept de dynastie? La troisième chose, c'est...
Un instant, parce que je vais oublier. Il faut que je traduise un peu parce que ça va être trop dur sinon. Acknowledge. I start the translation. Then there is one more question. The first two are the following. You mentioned the past elections as a transition into the post Mugabe era, but we see in many ways that there is still a persistence of the old system. So the question is, how far you think that we are really in some post Mugabe scenario, or how far things have remained unchanged? The second The second question is about I'm sorry, I need
The dynastization.
oui, pardon, yes, about dynastization. How far do you think that this is really the scenario going on, and especially how does this translate in practical terms? Is it rather a dynastization in family terms, or can we still uphold this definition and this idea by considering a dynastization in the form of a single party rule? Vous pouvez y aller avec la troisième question, hein, si vous voulez.
Ouais. La troisième question, c'est autour de l'idée, en tout cas des concepts d'analyse. Si je prends dans un certain nombre de régions en Afrique, par exemple, le chef, tant qu'il n'est pas mort, il est chef. Donc, de toute façon, mais en quoi c'est différent de ça? Ça, c'est la première chose. Et la deuxième chose, c'est le fait que les électeurs, soit par, je veux dire, parce qu'ils reçoivent l'argent ou les voitures, je sais pas, enfin, toutes les machins. Donc, le fait qu'ils reçoivent ça et qu'ils votent, est-ce que c'est pas un choix non plus? Je veux dire, de faire. Vous présentez comme si c'était les électeurs n'avaient pas le choix. Donc, en fait, soit ils ont le choix de prendre l'argent et de voter, soit ils ont le choix de ne pas prendre l'argent et de ne pas voter. Donc, est-ce que c'est pas un choix que les électeurs font? Donc, du coup, est-ce que ça valide pas quelque part l'élection, même s'il y a cette question d'argent? Et enfin bon, voilà. En fait, the third question is really, is there any traditional, I mean, concept that you can use to understand what's going on, in a sense that um, the in many African countries, the tradition that the chief, until he's dead or whatever, removed by force, I mean, he will stay on power. And there's something traditional in that way. And also that you are mentioning that, I mean, they are calling of the traditional leaders or institutions and so on. And then you say that people are voting because it's by bribery or people receive money. But at the same time, if they receive money and they choose, is it still a choice, or you're saying that they don't have any option rather than receiving money? Are they coerced to receive money or not? I mean, how it works?
C'est
All
trop
right.
tard pour choisir. All right.
Can I answer these three questions before I forget?
Okay.
So the first question about whether there is actually a transition from the Mugabe era to a new republic. The major difference, which shows a transition in terms of how political authority is structured, is Robert Mugabe never used the military to seek political consent and enforcement directly. Violence was used during the Mugabe era, but it was more supported by the party and to some extent the underground vigilante groups that are supported by a few security system structures. But now, post the coup, we have actually seen the military coming into the public space to influence decisions using the bullets against the electorate, which has never happened during the Mugabe era. So this is the top power structure that has changed. In terms of dynasticization around the party, there is a continuation. It has not changed. There is no transformation of practice, because what we saw during the Mugabe era is he wanted to stay until he's dead in power. When there was contestation for succession within the party, this is where we saw his wife coming into the public space to occupy political space that the old age of Mugabe was living. Today, we see the attempt to go beyond 2 electoral terms by the president, which means he is also seeking to stay for longer than what is expected according to the constitution. That is dynastization of the party by term of extension, right? But in terms of dynastization from the family, this is where I said you see the president's wife, like the previous time, coming in the public domain, starting to accelerate campaign and influence or popularity by distributing resources as a humanitarian hand. But at the same point, which Mugabe did not do, is we see the promotion of the current president's children into powerful military positions. That alone tells you now a difference with Mugabe. This comes more from a military point of view. This is where he is trying to dynastize his own power. So I think that's how I can respond on the dynastization, and also in terms of whether we have clear transition from the Mugabe era to another era. And in terms of whether people are being coerced to give their consent, I would say poverty can be used as an instrument to coerce people without using force. You can actually, we see a transition from the use of physical force to economic violence. When people are impoverished and are poor and they're given resources, they consent because they want to continue benefiting from rent seeking and partisan resource access to resource. So they are not being forced. They are being given resources in order to promote the populist idea and culture, which is couched around the use of money. But in any case where people fail to consent even after receiving resources, this is where we see violence coming in. Thank you. Over to you.
Ok. Alors, acknowledge, alors, il faudrait quand même nous dire quelque chose, parce que même ces questions n'ont de sens. Est-ce qu'ils ont le choix ou pas d'accepter les cadeaux ou pas, n'ont de sens que si, quelque part, je ne sais pas comment le dire, en fait, il faudrait être dans un système où on est à peu près sûr que les résultats des urnes sont déterminants. Alors qu'on sait que dans beaucoup de cas, en fait, ces résultats sont trafiqués. Hein? Alors, donc, ça veut dire que si on accepte pourquoi? Hein? Alors, est-ce que au Zimbabwe, ça c'est une question que je pose, hein, est-ce que les résultats des urnes sont trafiqués ou pas? Hein, à partir de là, on peut peut-être voir un peu plus clair par rapport à cette question de choix. Parce qu'au Congo-Brazza, je voyais bien comment ça se passait. Les gens savaient bien que leur choix n'était pas pris en compte et ils se disaient, alors, on va aller quand même prendre notre part, même si on sait que ça ne va pas se traduire, quoi. Voilà. Un petit résumé, Pietro, mais
Oui, je vais traduire votre question. Acknowledge. Remy just asked a question. I'm sorry, there's a bit of background noise. I hope you hear me loud and clear. Remy was asking the question about whether, obviously, the point that was made about votes being bought obviously has a variable influence on the political scene, on the outcome of the election, depending on how far electoral results are actually objective, meaning that in a system where rigging is widely possible and easy, it won't make sense to actually buy votes. So the main question Remy was asking was, how far do you think that well, ZANU-PF or the government, that Mnangagwa's party has a chance to actually influence the outcome of the election through rigging?
Thanks, Petro. I do think they have a higher chance of influencing the electoral outcome by, number one, rigging, number two, using patronage, access to resources to influence voter consent. The fact that people are beginning to, okay, there have been a talk by some people from the churches and some political parties saying we must postpone elections because they are very divisive, and we leave the current president to run up to 2030 as one of the justifications for changing the constitution. And because people are genuinely aware that violence has been happening every electoral cycle, there is psychologically some people believe that yes, it's necessary to extend to postpone elections. And once elections are postponed, it plays into the hands of the ruling party. That's number one. Number two, if they fail to influence the masses through other means, obviously rigging becomes one of the strategies. At the moment, I believe that they do not use one. They are less likely to use one strategy. They will use two strategies. Number one, rigging on the table, because rigging has generally, I think in most African countries, rigging elections has not come with any negative repercussions, either from the international community or regional bodies. They will just write, the regional observers and international observers will just write a report condemning the electoral results, and nothing happens. So there is no punishment for electoral malpractice. So what it means is you can rig as much as you want, number one. Number two, using money for political consent has never been condemned, and there have not been consequences for using that across many African countries. And therefore, it means because they are now using it now before even elections, it means it's likely to hype and increase when we get to the actual election process. I think that's my brief response. Thank you, and over to you.
But in your response, I don't understand. Did the vote, the result of the vote in Zimbabwe came from, comment on dit, les urnes?
Non, mais pas dit quoi, c'est rigging, ça veut dire qu'ils volent.
Hein?
En fait, les élections sont truquées.
Oui, c'est ça.
Ouais,
OK.
ils disent sont truquées.
Ah,
C'est
OK.
pour ça que je ne comprends pas pourquoi,
Oui.
voilà, pourquoi il faut payer les gens.
Non, non, mais c'est parce que c'est le jeu des élections. C'est pour ça que.
Exactement.
Voilà.
Ce n'est pas pour qu'ils votent.
Voilà. It's why. OK. Alors, est-ce qu'il y a d'autres questions avant que je continue? Oui.
Moi, j'avais juste une observation à faire.
Attends. Il y a une question. Il faut venir.
Moi, c'est sur la question de la religion. J'ai pas très bien compris en quoi c'était vraiment un outil puissant. Et surtout, lorsqu'il évoque la question religieuse, est-ce qu'il se cantonne aux seules questions chrétiennes ou il prend aussi en compte la spiritualité des tribus présentes? C'est ça aussi. Je sais pas si c'est clair.
OK. Tu as entendu?
Je vais traduire. Oui, j'ai entendu. Acknowledge there is another question, which is if you could be a bit more specific about the links between elections and religious patterns, and namely whether we're talking only about Christian or Catholic, the Christian or Catholic religion having an influence within politics, or whether it's other religions too.
Okay. So I must be clear here. The Catholics have generally been pro-democracy, and the Catholics have avoided being captured much more directly. But it's the Anglican that was captured at some point, but it's kind of like went back to its default mode in support of democracy. But we have traditional and Pentecostal churches. I think from a European perspective, I think you will understand the Protestant religious groups, and you will also understand the existence of traditional religious groups that are much more African. These are the groups whose leaders have been brought together to establish associations that will speak on behalf of all the religious groups that fall under them. And towards elections, these groups, they're brought together and they will be made to campaign on behalf of the ruling party. And if you trace from the biblical perspective, from a Christian point of view, they simply say leaders are chosen by God. So whoever is in leadership has been chosen by God, and therefore, because of that doctrine, it then influences the voters' behavior towards the support of the ruling party. So I'm subtracting the Catholics. The Catholics are less influenced compared to the other religious groups. But what has happened basically is the idea of bringing together religious groups into one basket, distribute resources, money, and cars to their leaders so that they become more mobile, so that they can show that if you support the ruling party, you can have resources which hypothetically may cascade down towards every member.
Je traduis.
Pardon.
That's
Non,
my
c'est
response
bon.
to that.
C'est bon. Ok. Attends, acknowledge. Pendant la guerre de libération, hein, il y a des travaux qui montrent que les guerriers, en fait, recouraient beaucoup à ces pratiques religieuses que tu appelles traditionnelles. Hein. Alors, par exemple, dans les livres de Ranger ou d'autres auteurs. Alors, est-ce que dans les pratiques électorales maintenant, on peut retrouver des traces de ces formes religieuses ou pas?
Je vais traduire. Hein.
Oui, oui.
Knowledge. Remy was asking another question about religion and politics and elections. Namely, he was mentioning that during the liberation struggle and war, many fighters used to refer to these forms of religion that you call traditional in their fight. How far do you think that these forms are also part of the contemporary political arena and the contemporary electoral process?
Prof is right. During the colonial era, during the liberation struggle, religious institutions supported the fight. They supported the liberation struggle. But what is peculiar and unique at the moment is that the churches that supported the liberation struggle are no longer the same churches that are supporting the current regime. Those that supported the liberation struggle mostly were the Catholics and to some extent the Protestant. Today, they still stand on the democratic principles. Unlike the traditional churches who were not there, most of them during the liberation struggle.
OK.
The
Vas-y.
rise of the Pentecostal church has come with what is called the prosperity doctrine. The prosperity doctrine is simply preaching success and money and power. And these are some of the religious institutions that are central to endorsing and legitimizing this particular form of political leadership and power. Over to you.
Vous voulez que je fasse une traduction?
Bah, je pense que... Oui, vas-y, mais rapide. Oui.
Donc, là, j'étais en train de dire qu'en réponse, en fait, ces formes de pouvoir qu'on appelle traditionnelles, de religion, pardon, qu'on appelle traditionnelles, elles ont, même dans la société zimbabwéenne, été assez radicalement remplacées par des nouvelles formes de religiosité qui sont plutôt liées au succès économique, etc. On pense, j'imagine, aux différents mouvements évangéliques, pentecôtistes, qui sont aussi plus proches du monothéisme, enfin des religions qui sont arrivées, qui se sont superposées sur les religions traditionnelles. Et que donc c'est plutôt dans cette arène-là qui se joue le lien entre religion et élection à ce jour.
Non, mais parce que, bon, pour nous, ça, c'est important, parce que c'est précisément ce on essaie de cerner à travers la notion des formes immanentes d'autorité.
C'est exactement ça. Exactement.
Voilà.
C'est exactement. Rémi, bonjour.
Bonjour, Joris. Oui. Vas-y.
Tu m'as devancé. Tu m'as devancé comme tous les grands maîtres. Donc, bonjour à tout le monde.
Ouais.
Bonjour,
félicitations à notre collègue zimbabwéen. Je le salue depuis le Gabon.
Au moins, du Gabon, ça marche. Donc, vas-y vite avant que
Voilà.
Olivier reprenne son électricité.
Voilà, donc bon, moi je suis satisfait. Je comprends pas très bien l'anglais, mais dans ce que j'ai pu comprendre, c'est la part, comment dire, prégnante des aspects religieux mis en relation avec la démocratie, le vote, comme justement ce que tu viens de dire, forme immanente de gouvernement social. Et sa conférence nous apporte quelque chose de supplémentaire dans la réflexion ou le modèle que nous avons mis en place. Toi, Rémi, tu disais justement dans une de tes réflexions en séminaire ou dans des documents que, en fait, les formes immanentes ne sont pas achevées, elles sont ouvertes. Par rapport au cas typique des élections auxquelles on aura affaire. Mais là, nous avons typiquement un apport concret entre les formes immanentes de gouvernement social et les formes de gouvernement politique. Et c'est très important pour comprendre l'interprétation de la démocratie et de sa narrativisation sous la forme de vote.
Peut-être que Pietro peut traduire cette partie pour l'instant.
Je termine. Okay. Nous devons exploiter cela pour nos futurs échanges, quoi.
OK.
C'est un apport important.
OK. Merci beaucoup, Joris. Pietro? Pietro a dit.
Yes, acknowledge. Joris was observing. Vous m'entendez pas? Allô?
Si, on t'entend.
Je vous entends, moi. Vous m'entendez? OK.
Si, on t'entend bien.
OK. Donc, Joris was intervened. Joris is helping us to actually refine our narrative approach to the election, and his observation was that this evolution, for example, of the religious patterns, is something that we should look at quite closely to understand how the conversion of the political forms of the social immanent forms of power is done, and which are the keys that the politicians have to strike in order to obtain this conversion and convince the people. And it is very interesting to observe that in recent times there has been a shift in what is happening in the religious sphere in Zimbabwe, and that this should be a part of our narration about the election, about a part of our tale, the tale we are constructing about the election.
Ok. Bon, là, il n'y avait pas de question. Pietro, c'était quoi ta remarque?
Moi, j'avais in English ou en français? Je vais le faire en français
D'abord en
d'abord.
français pour réveiller des gens ici et en English après.
Ma remarque était en fait pour revenir un peu sur la question de ce qui avait été dit avant, de comment les stratégies qui sont mises en place par, enfin dans ce cas par les partis au pouvoir pour s'assurer qu'un résultat des élections favorable soit produit, sont une combinaison et que en fait, ça fait écho à ce que l'on voit dans plusieurs pays depuis un certain temps. Et à mon avis, ça fait aussi un peu écho à ce que l'on voit même dans des pays qui sont en dehors de l'Afrique. Quand on a parlé la dernière fois, c'était intéressant, quand on a parlé la dernière fois du cas de la RDC, nous avons touché un peu à la question de Kabila et Tshisekedi et de comment en fait, surtout le premier des deux, s'adresse à des conseillers externes qui, en fait, lui préparent une stratégie ou plutôt une combinaison de stratégies pour s'assurer d'un certain résultat. Bon, dans le cas en question, c'était un moment plutôt de retrait de la vie politique active, donc de céder la place à son enfin, adversaire théorique, qui ensuite s'est avéré peut-être plus guerrier de ce que l'on croyait avant. Et donc c'était un peu ça le conseil, enfin la stratégie qui avait été adoptée par Kabila, vraisemblablement sous l'influence de quelqu'un qui l'aide à programmer sa stratégie politique. Par contre, dans plein d'autres pays, dont notamment le Zimbabwe, on observe que il y a de plus en plus vraiment une combinaison de stratégies. C'est-à-dire que du moment où la possibilité d'influencer le vote en termes de bourrage d'urne n'est pas forcément totalement assurée, il devient nécessaire aussi de mettre en place d'autres systèmes pour s'assurer d'un résultat favorable, et notamment, par exemple, le rachat de vote, simplement. À mon avis, c'est intéressant un peu d'essayer de comprendre en amont d'une élection, en fonction de quelles de ces stratégies sont mises en place et il y a un lien, à mon avis, entre quelles sont les stratégies mises en place et surtout quelle est leur variété, à quel point les gens qui sont au pouvoir ou les gens qui sont donnés, disons, pour favoris dans une élection sont sûrs du résultat.
Ok. Là, toi, t'es où là?
C'était la violence qui faisait la une.
Ah,
Vous m'entendez?
un moment, on t'a perdu un moment, mais
Ah,
c'est bon.
vous m'entendez là?
Maintenant, on t'entend. Oui, oui, oui,
Ah,
là, c'est
pardon.
bon.
Moi, là,
C'est en
je suis
Italie?
connecté en Wi-Fi, ça devrait bien. Ouais, je suis en Italie, ouais. Si, si, si.
Ok. Bah ouais, c'est comme en Afrique, quoi. Ok.
Ouais, c'est pire encore.
Vas-y, vas-y. Ok, continue et tu traduis, tu fais un petit résumé pour Acknowledge, s'il te plaît. Euh, Voilà l'Italie.
Prof, I didn't hear you clearly.
Vous m'entendez?
Yeah. No, I asked to Pietro
Non,
to translate for you, huh? To give you a very brief summary
si, si,
of what he
si.
said. Of, but he's in Italy. In Italy. Italy is like African countries.
Thing should be working quite fine unless the Wi-Fi is worse than the phone connection.
Ok.
Vous m'entendez mal?
Non, non, on t'entend bien quand tu parles vraiment devant le micro. Fais un petit résumé
Mais j'ai un casque, donc le micro
pour
devrait être. Ouais, ouais.
les-
Knowledge. I was observing rather than asking a question. That going back to what we were saying about the combination of different strategies to ensure the outcome of the vote, that I think it might be very revealing to try to analyze more in detail which of the different strategies an out come si dice leader sortant a leader that wants to be reconfirmed through an election to what strategy he or she recurs to ensure that he will stay in power. I think in Zimbabwe we have seen. I don't know. This could be also a question for you. To what extent do you think that there has been a shift in Zimbabwean politics in this respect? I remember that when I came there for the election before the last, violence was really the main strategy that was put in place by Mugabe's entourage, let's say, by Mnangagwa, and also more precisely, the violence was in the previous election really the thing that changed everything. And I remember you were working in an NGO that was somehow preparing the citizens to cope with the situations where there are constrictions to vote done through violence. To what extent do you think that there has been a shift in Zimbabwe and that there is more of a combination of different strategies now than there was in 2017 or in 2012, for example? Excusez-moi, juste, sorry, let me translate just my question. J'ai rajouté un peu une question à la fin qui était de demander à Knowledge à quel point il pense que cette stratégie qui était vraiment la stratégie principale dans les élections des années 2010, par exemple, qui était la stratégie de l'exercice de la violence et de la coercion d'un point de vue de la violence sur les citoyens afin de piloter les résultats du vote. À quel point est-ce qu'il y a eu un changement entre ce qui se faisait à l'époque et ce que l'on voit aujourd'hui où on nous décrit une
Yeah.
pluralité, une diversité de stratégies? Sorry, acknowledge. I hope my question was clear and that you can
Attends,
try and answer.
attends, pardon. Il y avait une chose, c'est qu'il avait dit qu'il n'y avait pas, c'était pas violent. Mais, sorry, no, knowledge.
Sure.
Wait for,
Okay.
please, please. Alors, mais surtout, par rapport à la question que tu poses, on sait qu'à un moment, Mugabe avait perdu les élections, hein, avait perdu le vote. Et Mugabe a refusé de quitter le pouvoir. Donc ça, hein, et il y a même eu des Sud-Africains qui étaient intervenus pour faire des machins, et que Mugabe a gouverné pendant 5 ans sans avoir eu la majorité présidentielle. C'est-à-dire que, d'une certaine manière, ça revient un peu à ce que je disais tout à l'heure, c'est que les résultats des urnes, il s'en fout un peu, et là, c'est carrément, il n'a même pas besoin de les trafiquer. Hein. Et bon, là, du coup, quand Acknowledge dit qu'il n'y avait pas de violence, or, on sait qu'il y a quand même eu une répression de l'opposition. Mais comment il peut, en fait, qu'il nous précise en quoi il y a pas de violence dans ce système-là pour quelque part, ouais, à l'époque de Mugabe, et même d'ailleurs Mugabe, il n'a jamais reconnu qu'il n'était pas président. Il est mort président dans sa tête. Hein.
Je,
Vas-y. Voilà. Ah, vas-y, mais
je vais
rapidement.
te dire très rapidement.
Oui, oui.
Knowledge. Remy also was asking another question, which is
Non, mais
associated.
je prolongeais ta question.
Oui, exactement, which is associated to what I was asking before. He was mentioning that Mugabe held one of his last mandate without actually apparently having a positive outcome in terms of votes. What happened during the election? He just clung to power beyond what he was supposed to do, and then there was this transition where Mugabe's rule ended. To what extent do you think that violence has maybe not entirely, obviously not entirely disappeared from the Zimbabwean political scene, but has become, let's say, a minor part of our narration compared to what it was before?
Yeah, so I will answer both questions, your question and Prof's questions with this response. I think there has been a shift from the use of absolute violence to the use of subtle violence. Now, absolute violence has been like a perpetual practice that was mainly conducted or perpetuated by party members together with the state security. But at the moment, violence has slightly changed. Like in the 2018 and 2023 elections, there was literally no violence. If it was there, there were few situations or scenarios where violence happened, but most of the people had to consent out of fear and also confusion about what the government is offering. And lastly, I would say the subtle violence that we have seen is where the military becomes the key actors in perpetuating violence and not necessarily the party members. That's very significant in terms of change, in terms of the instrument that is used, right? However, in my final analysis, I do believe that violence could still be there, but the people who lead it are different, and how it is undertaken is also different. We have seen more of the subtle violence by the state security actors, the military, but also the Secret Service with lots of allegations of abductions happening, which I think it shows a difference in some way. But I wouldn't rule out that it has disappeared. I would say it is still there, but there is now a new combination of strategies that are put in line and they are tested depending on the severity of what they want to achieve. So one cannot rule out its complete difference, its disappearance, because the system has not changed. The political party has not changed. The mindset of the leaders in power has not changed. So the infrastructure remains there as it was. but it's just the modus operandi that changes depending on the need and interests.
OK.
Vous voulez que je traduise?
Non, ça va.
Ouais.
You can speak in English.
I mean, I think I would like, it's not, I mean, I'm not specialist on the area of election, but I just want to put something that is struggling with me. As you describe it, or as Petro said it later, the use of different strategy, I mean, or the huge mobilization of the party through bribery, through the use of religion, through distribution of resource, capturing traditional leaders, the support of, I mean, business people, and so on and so on, seems to me that they, as if the president or whoever is going to election needs the approval of the community, or needs to convince, as if under quotation, they try to convince the community in different fashion to elect them. That means that election is not only done for foreigners to show that we're in democracy, but also for internal people saying that, yes, I mean, whatever, in different fashion, I mean, you have elected us. Then that is a bit a shift for me from the leading by acceptance from leading by fear. I mean, why they have to mobilize all these major strategies if they want to lead by fear? Then there is something that maybe it will be very interesting to look in the future. What is all the strategies? What do they need it if they can rig the election and if they could lead by force? But here we have people trying to use a kind of multiple strategy to convince, and there is something like which is not very clear in my mind. I'm sorry to disturb.
Okay. Very quickly, oui, PH. Tu traduis rapidement et tu... Oui, s'il
Je
te plaît.
traduis en français?
Oui, mais
Ok.
rapidement.
Alors, donc, la question, enfin, qui est posée un peu dans l'edge, là, c'est en fait de nous expliquer comment est-ce que ces passages a pu avoir lieu, c'est-à-dire d'un système qui était plutôt ancré sur une coercion ouvertement violente et à un système où nous avons des stratégies un peu plus mélangées afin de conquérir l'électorat. Moi, je voulais juste profiter pour ajouter une petite contribution à cette idée. Moi, à mon avis, il y a un facteur clé dans tout ça qui est les outils de communication qui se sont diffusés en Afrique dans les dernières années, notamment les smartphones, et qui ont montré une voie, à mon avis, pour les partis qui sont au pouvoir ou les élites qui sont au pouvoir, plus facile que celle de la coercion pour le maintenir. C'est plus simple d'avoir une équipe qui travaille sur les réseaux sociaux, d'avoir quelqu'un qui va distribuer quelques petites sommes, que d'avoir un réseau sur le territoire d'hommes fidèles, armés, qui sont là dans les bureaux de vote, etc., pour exercer la coercion. Acknowledge, I hope we will give you a chance to answer this question. I translated it, and I also added a little contribution to a potential answer, which is the fact that I think that the communication tools that are available to the African people in general terms and that have really spread very widely in late years in most of the countries we're looking at are a key factor.
Sorry. I want to, before you answer, I want to make a precision in French, and Pietro will translate for you. Non, une des questions, c'est qu'il ne faut pas qu'on oublie nos hypothèses de base. Nos hypothèses de base, c'est quand même dans l'idée que quelque part, hein, il y a des formes de consentement, hein, qui ne relèvent pas seulement de la coercition. Il y a d'autres formes, hein, et donc, avoir peur, c'est un mode de consentement, mais ce n'est pas seulement la violence elle-même. hein. C'est l'idée que le consentement se fait un peu, le consentement à la domination, ça se fait un peu sous la forme du... Ils sont là? Ah, du devoir. OK. Bon, mais il reste... Ah bon, OK. Bon, sorry. C'est pour ça que ce qui était intéressant, c'était l'histoire de la zombification, parce que ça pose un vrai problème. Comment on peut consentir à être gouverné par quelqu'un qui est incapable lui-même de se gouverner lui-même, de bouger lui-même, hein? Donc, il y a tout un système qui est mis en place, hein, qui nous permet euh, d'être gouverné. Et c'est ça qu'il faut scruter. C'est pour ça qu'à la fin, je me disais, avec, et que Acknowledge n'allait pas complètement là-dedans, je me dis, est-ce qu'au Zimbabwe, l'intrigue électorale qui était intéressante, c'est que souvent, on sort de la zombification ou par les fils d'eux, par les enfants ou cela, alors qu'au Zimbabwe, est-ce qu'on n'est pas sorti du zombie par un autre zombie et qui va même devenir encore plus zombie si on fait sauter la clause de... hein, parce que là, il a 90 ans, c'est ça, hein?
Ouais.
Alors, si on continue, s'il a encore 2 mandats, on aura un président de 100 ans. Bon, I'm sorry, but we have to stop here because the next our colleague will come to occupy the room. Thank you very much, Acknowledge, and we'll go on for the discussion. Thanks. Quand même. Merci beaucoup. 29, hein? OK. Ouf.
Thank you, Acknowledge.
Thank you, Acknowledge. Tu
All
lui
right,
dis que...
thanks, Petro. Cheers,
We
eh?
have to, we
Enjoy.
have to we have to stop really on time because the room is being occupied by somebody else. But it was very interesting,
all
and
right, cheers. Thanks, bye.
we will go on talking about this. Absolutely.
OK. Merci beaucoup, Acknowledge. Merci, Alban. Merci, Joris. Merci, tout le monde. À bientôt. Ciao. Oh my God.